Live free or die. This is no casual slogan in New Hampshire. An independent spirit has ruled the day here ever since this original colony was founded. From the moment explorers first arrived to seek a fortune from the sea, people here have been as stubborn and steadfast as the granite they blast out of the ground. It's a small but rugged state, the birthplace of the Republican Party, but where independent voters in tiny towns command the attention of a nation. Aerial New Hampshire is a journey down America's smallest coastline, across one of its greatest forests, to the top of a rocky peak with winds so powerful they can blow climbers right off their feet. Live free or die. This is New Hampshire. North Conway, New Hampshire, is one of the coolest mountain towns in the U.S. For decades, rock climbers have been making their way up the sheer face of Cathedral Ledge, a 500-foot granite bluff overlooking the Saco River. 12,000 years ago, glaciers sculpted and smoothed this giant hunk of granite. Then, over millennia, New England's harsh winters forged the cracks in the rock that have tempted climbers. But its vertical face was so intimidating, it was only first scaled in 1931. Now, it's a climber's utopia. Those preparing to take on major peaks out west use the ledge to cut their teeth. The only people here today are those who've come for the view. But climbers know that with one misstep, the ledge can be deadly. It's why many say a prayer before they dig in here. You can tell by the names they've given to the paths they take to the top: Final Gesture, End of Days, and Book of Solemnity. There's even a path up called They Died Laughing. But Cathedral Ledge isn't the first place in New Hampshire that has lured thrill seekers. They've been coming to this land for centuries, long before the state was even founded. Almost 400 years ago, a restless adventurer named Captain John Smith mapped these waters and found that they were rich in cod, sturgeon, and herring. Smith named the area New England after his home country. But he called these piles of rock offshore after himself: Smith's Isles. For Smith, fishing here was a favorite pastime. He later wrote, "What sport doth yield a more pleasing content than angling with a hook and crossing the sweet air from isle to isle, over the silent streams of a calm sea?" Smith returned to England with 40,000 dried fish, evidence of the New World's cod-rich waters. His praise of the region's beauty and natural resources helped encourage settlement of New England. Smith's Isles, which have since been renamed the Isles of Shoals, were home to a thriving fishing industry through the Revolutionary War. One of them, Star Island, is marked by a monument to an 18th century minister who preached to the isle's wayward fishermen. Smith never returned to New England, but in 1623, a group of English colonists arrived. The settlers established a community here at Odeorn Point, near the mouth of the Piscataqua River. They hunted and fished along this windy coast. Their first settlement soon spread upriver, where a deep, safe harbor beckoned trading and fishing ships. They called this new area Strawberry Bank, after the wild berries that grew along the shore. In charge of the colony was John Mason, a captain who hailed from the town of Portsmouth in the English county of Hampshire. In 1653, Strawberry Bank was renamed Portsmouth in Mason's honor. Today, Portsmouth, New Hampshire is the biggest town on the coast with a population of over 20,000 people. It's still possible to get a glimpse of the city's early days. These are the oldest buildings in town, some dating back more than 3 centuries. In the 1950s, an entire historic neighborhood was slated for demolition in a fit of urban renewal. But townspeople banded together and saved what they could. These 42 buildings provide a glimpse into Portsmouth's early architectural history. Partly thanks to the lead of Strawberry Bank, this quaint town has reinvented itself as a major New England tourist spot. Market Square is the epicenter of Portsmouth's growing arts and historic district. A tech boom in the 90s and an influx of migrants have helped give the city a new life. Today, the state is ranked in the top 10 for high-tech job concentration nationwide, and most of that is centered here in Portsmouth. But while New Hampshire's seacoast is quickly becoming the E-coast, one of the state's biggest employers is also one of its oldest. It lies just across the Piscataqua River. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, founded in 1800, is the oldest of its kind in the U.S. During World War II, the shipyard employed 25,000 workers and turned out 70 submarines at record speed. 4 of them were launched in a single day. It's now a repair and maintenance facility for America's fleet of nuclear subs, one of which can be spotted beneath scaffolding. But despite its name, the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and the island it sits on are not actually in New Hampshire. Seavey Island was the subject of a bitter land dispute between New Hampshire and Maine in 2001 that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The court threw out the case, and the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard remains in Maine. Long before the days of nuclear subs, Portsmouth was protected by 7 forts. There's been one continuously at this site since 1632, when 4 great guns were installed and pointed out toward the sea. Fort William and Mary didn't see real action until the American Revolution. On December 13, 1774, Boston's most famous messenger, Paul Revere, rode into Portsmouth and is said to have shouted his signature cry, "The Redcoats are coming!" Revere warned the rebels that British ships were on their way to seize gunpowder at the fort. A band of 400 rebels quickly stormed the garrison, stole its gunpowder, and triumphantly lowered the British flag. Soon after the war, New Hampshire gave the fort to the federal government, which renamed it Fort Constitution. Just down the coast is one of the state's tiniest towns. Newcastle is less than 1 square mile, but it's played a surprisingly big role on the world stage. In 1904, Japan stood up to Russia's pursuit of a warm water port in the Pacific. Most of the world expected Russia to win. But Japan's fledgling military beat back the Russians in battle after battle. American President Teddy Roosevelt stepped in and invited diplomats from both countries to Wentworth by the Sea, one of New England's grandest hotels. Roosevelt earned a Nobel Peace Prize for the treaty he helped negotiate here. In wartime, the island played another important role. During World War II, Newcastle's Fort Stark was a training ground for troops and also anchored an anti-submarine net that stretched 2 miles across the mouth of the Piscataqua River to protect the city of Portsmouth. New Hampshire has the smallest seacoast in the U.S. It's just a tiny sliver, 18 miles long. Its southeast corner is the most densely populated area of the state, home to more than 60% of its residents. Today, more people are moving to New Hampshire than to its neighbor, Maine. 25% of the state's 1.3 million residents were actually born in nearby Massachusetts. One reason more and more people are moving here is because the state has no sales or personal income tax. Seeking a better life in New Hampshire is hardly a new concept. European colonists looking for a place to safely practice their new Protestant faith headed for Massachusetts. Those just looking to be free came to New Hampshire. In many ways, colonial New Hampshire was far more tolerant than its cousin to the south. Take the 17th century witch hunt frenzy. While dozens were hanged in Connecticut and Massachusetts, only a few women in New Hampshire were ever even jailed for witchcraft. One of those met her fate on these now peaceful shores. Hampton, New Hampshire is a quiet town, but its tranquil image belies one of the most notorious periods in American history. It was here in the 1600s that a woman named Goodwife Eunice Cole became the now famous Witch of Hampton. By all accounts, Goody Cole was eccentric and ill-tempered, which may be why she became the town's scapegoat. Locals blamed her for everything, from sickening cattle to poisoning bread. In 1656, Goody Cole was imprisoned on charges of witchcraft. And though there's no evidence she was ever convicted, she spent more than 10 years in and out of jail. After her release, she lived in a small shack on the outskirts of town, destitute and despised. Legend says after she died, villagers drove a stake through Goody Cole's heart and buried her in a ditch somewhere in Hampton. In 1938, townspeople gathered to clear Goody Cole's name. When the unanimous vote declaring Cole's innocence was announced, the great bell of the First Congregational Church, home to the oldest congregation in New Hampshire, rang out in celebration. Despite its small size, New Hampshire has long been a deeply political state, with a long history of shaking up the national debate. In the 19th century, here in Exeter, agitators were upset with the Democratic Party's pro-slavery stance. So in 1853, Amos Tuck, a local attorney, called a meeting at a hotel named Major Blake's. The group decided to form a new anti-slavery party, calling themselves Republicans. 7 short years later, the party had its first president in the White House, Abraham Lincoln. But while New Hampshire may not commonly be known as the birthplace of the Republican Party, it's better remembered for its nickname, the Granite State. During the 19th century building boom, New Hampshire granite was the construction material of choice for important structures up and down the East Coast, from the Brooklyn Bridge to the Library of Congress. Many of the buildings in the state capital of Concord are made of it too. In 1818, $82,000 bought enough granite to build New Hampshire's new State House, and even pay for the construction costs and furniture. It came from a quarry just a few miles north of the city, at a place called Rattlesnake Hill. There are easier construction materials to work with. It can take dynamite to carve apart these giant chunks of rock. What makes Concord granite so special is its fine-grained white coloring. Geologists believe it got that way roughly 350 million years ago, when two continental plates collided. The event generated enough friction and heat to melt a bed of sediment and turn it into solid granite. Today, Concord granite is quarried for tabletops and curbstone, among many other uses. But Concord is not just famous for its granite. It was also home to one of the state's greatest heroes, a Concord High School teacher who turned her eyes to New Hampshire's future and to Earth's future. In the 1980s, NASA wanted to inspire a new generation of space explorers. So, they chose social studies teacher Krista McAuliffe to be their first civilian astronaut. She taught here at Concord High School. McAuliffe was planning to give lessons from space, but on January 28, 1986, millions of school children watched as the Space Shuttle Challenger she was in exploded just 73 seconds after launch. Her legacy lives on here at Concord's McAuliffe Shepard Discovery Center. Before she died, McAuliffe had told the world, "I touch the future. I teach." Stretching south from Concord is the majestic Merrimack River. Merrimack is the Abenaki Indian word for a place with strong current. And it was through these rapids and eddies that one of New England's most revered thinkers paddled. Henry David Thoreau was just 22 at the time. He kept a journal along the way, noting where he and his older brother stopped to camp, and marveled at the history layered into these ancient Indian fishing grounds. Thoreau wrote, "The murmur of unchronicled nations has died away along these shores." Later, at his hut on Walden Pond, he turned his journal into a book. A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers was one of only 2 books Thoreau published during his lifetime. It was a tribute to his friendship with his brother, who died just 3 years after their journey. But Thoreau wasn't the only one who had his eye on the Merrimack. In 1800, this was the site of a tiny village called Derryfield, home to just 557 residents whose houses were clustered around the Merrimack River and its Amoskeag Falls. In the Pennacook Indian language, the word Namuskeag means the great fishing place. But capitalist pioneers saw the river and its falls as an opportunity for industry on a massive scale. By 1807, an ambitious local businessman named Samuel Blodgett had built a canal and lock system that enabled ships to bypass the falls. Mills quickly sprang up along the canal, powered by the rushing water. And with that, America's Industrial Revolution was born. Derryfield was renamed Manchester, with the dream that it would soon look like England's own thriving mill town. Inside these mills, raw cotton from the American South was turned into cloth and soon made Manchester, New Hampshire, the largest cotton textile producer in the world, trumping its namesake in England. But 130 years later, it all came crashing down. With the arrival of electricity, Manchester's water-powered mills lost their place in the sun. The Amoskeag Falls have since been covered by a concrete dam and power station. Manchester has since played a role in another major American revolution. Dick and Mac McDonald, the brothers behind the Golden Arches, were from here. The brothers left New Hampshire in the 1920s to seek their fortune in California. They started out with a hot dog stand and soon transitioned into a drive-in barbecue joint. Then, they closed up their restaurant, fired all the car hops, and threw out most of the menu. When they reopened, customers stepped right up to a window and could order a 15-cent hamburger and 10-cent fries. To top it off, a pair of golden arches high in the sky. But it was Ray Kroc, a milkshake machine salesman, who turned the food concept of the McDonald brothers into an American dynasty. After the brothers sold their business to Kroc, Dick McDonald moved back to Manchester, and he was quite surprised to later hear Kroc call himself the founder of McDonald's. South of the city lies a road frequently traveled. At this typical New Hampshire house, a young man took up chicken farming and spent his evenings writing at the kitchen table. Robert Frost, one of America's best poets, once called farming a practical way to earn a living, although he said, "I'd never yet shown a talent for practicality." The four-time Pulitzer Prize winner lived at this farm in Derry for 9 years. The core of his writing came from the simple rhythms and rituals he observed here. Frost later moved north to this secluded farmstead in the foothills of the White Mountains. Here, he wrote his most famous lines. "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference." But not every corner of New Hampshire is as peaceful as Frost's. NASCAR rolls into the New Hampshire Motor Speedway twice a year, making Loudon the multi-billion-dollar industry's most northern pit stop. When stock cars aren't racing, this one-mile oval track hosts the Loudon Classic, the oldest motorcycle race in America, as well as vintage car races and drivers just paying for a thrill. For $150, they can tear up the speedway all day long. The track, with its unusually tight turns, has also been mired in controversy. In 2000, 2 drivers died during practice runs on the speedway. One of them was the 19-year-old grandson of NASCAR legend Richard Petty. Just 5 miles away stand traces of a way of life all but gone. In 1792, a band of people seeking religious freedom settled here in Canterbury, hoping to create a peaceful, sinless society. They filled their evenings with a form of worship that shocked their Protestant contemporaries, an ecstatic ritual dancing that gave the Shakers their name. To be a perfect Shaker, you had to be celibate. So instead of maintaining families, the Shakers poured all of their energy into the construction and maintenance of their gardens and community dwellings. The Shakers believed God could be found in the quality of their craftsmanship, which is now legendary. Shaker is synonymous with quality design. One of the largest Shaker buildings ever constructed still lies in nearby Enfield. It's called the Great Stone Dwelling. When it was built in 1841, it had kitchens on the first floor, meeting rooms on the second, and community, sleeping, and living rooms above. While other structures around the Great Stone Dwelling may look historic, many are actually modern lakeside cottages, built by developers. For New England's early farmers, the devil was right around almost every corner. And the man who was born in this tiny settler's cabin drove the devil right out of New Hampshire. Or so goes the story, The Devil and Daniel Webster. Webster was born here just after the Revolutionary War. He grew up to be a powerful senator and served as a Secretary of State under 3 presidents. His silver-tongued speeches were largely credited with convincing individual states to abide by federal laws. Webster argued liberty and union, now and forever, one and inseparable. When writer Stephen Vincent Benet needed a hero for his story to save a poor New Hampshire farmer from the devil, he chose Daniel Webster, the one man he knew who could out-talk Satan. Despite its tiny coastline, New Hampshire is still a very watery state, with 5 of New England's rivers originating here. New Hampshire has earned the title the Mother of Rivers. Its own river system stretch more than 41,000 miles. To span these waterways, road builders in the 1800s used covered bridges to prevent water from reaching the wooden trusses below. The Cornish-Windsor Bridge, which connects New Hampshire to Vermont, is the longest historic covered bridge in the United States, measuring 450 feet. But these days, most historic bridges are narrow and impractical for highly traveled routes. Many are being decommissioned, including this little stone arch bridge in a place called Hillsborough Lower Village. And times are changing under the bridges too. An invader has been spotted in the waterways of New Hampshire. Experts think it may have hitchhiked from out west on the boots and rods of fishermen. It's an invasive species of algae called rock snot that grows on the bottom of riverbeds. It's hard to see from the air, but can stretch for miles underwater and disrupt delicate river ecosystems. Once it takes over, experts don't know how to kill rock snot. They're worried it could invade other rivers and streams in the state. And rock snot isn't the only threat to New Hampshire's wilderness. Imagine New Hampshire without its brilliant fall foliage. Scientists say that global warming is endangering the hardwood tree species that provide this colorful annual canopy, which some consider to be the most brilliant in the world. These fall leaves draw thousands of visitors to the state. But it's not the only reason they come. More than 100,000 arrive every year just to climb this mountain. This is said to be the second most climbed mountain in the world, after Japan's Mount Fuji. New Hampshire's Mount Monadnock is named for an Algonquin Indian word that means mountain that stands alone. Thousands of years ago, glaciers scraped and leveled the land here, but left one solitary peak behind. On a clear day, hikers reaching its 3,165-foot-high peak have a view that can stretch to 6 states and even the Boston skyline over 60 miles away. Once, forests of virgin spruce stretched right up to Monadnock's summit. But in the late 1700s, settlers set fire to the mountain's lower slopes to clear them for pasture. Not long after, farmers lit the mountain on fire again, hoping to destroy cover for wolves. The inferno stripped the top flanks of the mountain completely bare, and they've never recovered. But down below, the fields and forests surrounding Monadnock are as lush as they were centuries ago. It was here in 1764, just 18 miles away from the peak, that a pioneer named John Grimes chose a spot to build himself a log cabin. Grimes was Hancock, New Hampshire's first settler. His cabin is long gone, and little else about him is known. He and others who followed obtained a charter for the town of Hancock in 1779. On Main Street lies the Hancock Inn, the oldest New Hampshire inn still in operation, dating from 1789, just 10 years after the town was incorporated. Picturesque towns and villages like Hancock have inspired artists for centuries. Less than 10 miles south of Hancock is the oldest artist colony in the United States. Ever since it was founded in 1907, the McDowell Colony has offered artists a place to live and work for a few weeks at a time without distraction. More than 6,000 artists have passed through here, racking up 67 Pulitzer Prizes. Willa Cather, James Baldwin, Alice Walker, Meredith Monk, and Thornton Wilder are just a few. Inspired by the surrounding town of Peterborough, Wilder wrote a work known to nearly every high school drama club. Our Town, a Pulitzer Prize-winning play about coming of age in small-town America. And from an early age, Peterborough citizens develop a passion for politics. Hundreds pack this town hall every election season. It's the local polling station, and lately, it's become a mandatory stop on the presidential campaign trail, where politicians deliver stump speeches and take spirited questions from New Hampshire's independent-minded voters. Moving west across the southern corner of New Hampshire is evidence of the state's rich farming tradition. Starting in the 1700s, settlers cleared small hill farms here in the thick, silty soil along the banks of the Connecticut River. Some of these family farms sent food downstream to Boston during the Revolutionary War. Today, the region is still the heart of the state's dairy industry, which produces nearly 40 million gallons of milk a year. Stonewall Farm, which has been operating for nearly 250 years, honors the region's agricultural roots by producing organic milk and grass-fed beef. As we head north along the Connecticut River, a fort appears on the bank. It's called the Fort at Number 4 in Charlestown. In 1777, New Hampshire General John Stark rallied 1,500 militiamen from around the state, most of them inexperienced farmers and woodsmen. He then marched them westward to Vermont. There, at the Battle of Bennington, Stark's troops delivered the colonies a major victory over the British. Years later, Stark wrote a toast to his comrades in the war. "Live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils." Words that would become New Hampshire's state motto. North of Charlestown are rolling hills and fields that, some say, have no equal on earth. Around the turn of the 20th century, hundreds of artists and writers flocked here. The Cornish colony, as it came to be known, began when sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens arrived in 1885 and turned a former inn at its grounds into a house and summer studio. St. Gaudens is known for having designed the double eagle, considered the most beautiful American coin ever made. Other artists followed, including illustrator Maxfield Parrish. The banks of the Connecticut River have also been home to a famous New York runaway. Here, along New Hampshire's border with Vermont, was the longtime home of J.D. Salinger, author of Catcher in the Rye. Though his house can be just as difficult to spot as Salinger was himself. The book is an American classic about a teenage boy named Holden Caulfield who tries to run away from an adult world he sees as phony. It was an instant hit in 1951, and Salinger became famous overnight. But then, he ran away to New Hampshire. He lived here in seclusion for almost 60 years and passed away at his home on January 27, 2010. For decades, students at nearby Dartmouth College tried to hunt their idol down. Rumors of Salinger's sightings on the campus green and at local cafes have now turned into campus legends. Salinger hadn't published a book since 1963, even though he said he never stopped writing. Fans dream about what American literary treasures may be hidden away in his Connecticut River Valley house. The Lakes region of New Hampshire is a sparkling legacy of the glaciers. And the jewel in the crown is Lake Winnipesaukee, the largest lake in the state. 23 miles long, covering 72 square miles, it first seems more like a series of islands than a lake. That's due to its etched shoreline of inlets, harbors, and its nearly 300 islands. These deep blue waters have been a centuries-old gathering place for Native Americans. They named it Winnipesaukee, meaning Smile of the Great Spirit. And the Spirit still calls. Today, the lakeshore is dappled with inns and private summer homes, havens for vacationers from Boston and New York City. The historic town of Center Harbor, once a landing place for steamboats and stagecoaches, has been a popular summer resort since the 1800s. Moving north, a quintessential New England fall landscape emerges. Small villages dot the valleys, and stately mansions perch on hilltops, all set off by the fiery orange and yellow foliage of autumn. And then, a swath of trees welcomes visitors to the White Mountain National Forest, some of the most beautiful scenery in the eastern United States. It's one of New Hampshire's most hard-fought, hard-won, and prized resources. The White Mountains are part of the Appalachian mountain chain, and the Appalachian Trail crosses through the middle of the forest on its way to Georgia. Today, hikers explore the forest along some 1,200 miles of trail. The region is popular with anglers as well, who are drawn to the forest's rivers and streams. Motorists take in the sights via the Kancamagus Scenic Highway. But this forest wasn't always so picturesque. After the Civil War, big logging companies bought up huge tracts of land here and started stripping them of timber, damaging watersheds in the process. Water-powered mills downstream were badly affected. Public outcry finally led to the establishment of the White Mountain National Forest in 1918. It now covers 800,000 acres, an area larger than the entire state of Rhode Island. Today, the White Mountain Forest is one of the most visited national forests in the country. But these mountains hold hidden dangers. Hikers need to be especially careful, or they could be blown right off their feet. Those on a quest to climb New Hampshire's mountains are called peak baggers. But all too often, they fail. One hiker who almost lost his life here said, "The biggest mistake people make in the Whites is not turning back." Early fall is a dangerous time. Most people think the weather is still mild enough for the climb up Mount Lafayette. But above the tree line, the temperature quickly drops. And storms can ignite in minutes. Winds whip so fast through these spiky outcroppings that they can blow rain and sleet horizontal. Even in fall, temperatures at the top are cold enough for hypothermia to set in. Each year, between 150 and 200 hikers are lost or injured in New Hampshire's mountains. Search and rescue efforts cost the state more than $250,000 and thousands of volunteer hours every year. It can take a crew of 18 to carry just one injured hiker down a mountain. The state recently passed a law that said climbers found to have been unprepared must reimburse the state for their rescue costs. The message? Climb at your own peril. Mount Washington is the most dangerous peak of them all. At 6,288 feet, it's small by world standards, but it's New England's tallest. On clear days at the peak, you can see out to the Atlantic or into Canada. But most days, you can barely see your hand. 3 major storm tracks meet here. When they collide, hurricane-force winds erupt. Winds so strong, they can blow hikers right off the mountain. Over 140 people have died here since 1849, 33 of them since 1990. According to scientists, Mount Washington holds the record for the strongest wind speed ever recorded by observers on the planet's surface. In 1934, winds roared at an unprecedented 231 miles per hour. Lower down, glaciers and the fast-moving rivers created by their melt once scored out impressive notches. The rivers that remain today are just trickles of their former selves, but still stunning as they spill over smooth granite ledges or plunge nearly 200 feet. Here lies a place that almost went undiscovered, a water chute also known as the Flume at the base of Mount Liberty. Just 20 feet wide, this granite gorge was largely unknown until 1808. That's when a 93-year-old woman named Aunt Jess Guernsey set out looking for a new fishing hole. Instead, she discovered this otherworldly chasm. It runs for 800 feet, with walls of granite towering 90 feet above. North of the White Mountains, you are truly in the wilds of New Hampshire. While only 12% of the state's residents live up in the North Country, these forests are home to 4,500 moose. There used to be a lot of farmland here, but it returned to forest when farmers took jobs in cities and towns. Today, New Hampshire is the second most forested state in America, after its neighbor, Maine. The soil here in the north is rich, perfect potato country. In the 1800s, Colebrook was known as the potato capital of New Hampshire. At the time, the spuds were milled into starch and used to make a potato whiskey, which farmers hauled to Maine and traded for supplies like molasses and saltfish. But travel 10 miles due east of here, and you'll reach the most politically famous spot in the state, Dixville Notch. It's tiny, an unincorporated village with just 75 residents, and a huge resort. But every 4 years, politicians from around the nation turn their eyes here. By law, New Hampshire holds its primaries a week ahead of any other state, and the first votes are cast in Dixville Notch. That's because they open their polls at the stroke of midnight on primary day. And with only a couple of dozen registered voters, they can count their results faster than almost anywhere else. New Hampshire is one of the least populous states in the country, but since 1952, almost every candidate who has taken to the White House has won their New Hampshire primary. But there have been exceptions. In 1992, Bill Clinton came in second to Paul Tsongas. George W. Bush lost to Senator John McCain in the 2000 primary. And in 2008, Hillary Clinton defeated Barack Obama here by just 3 percentage points. From tiny Dixville Notch, across the industries of Manchester, to the Isles of Shoals, New Hampshire by air offers an opportunity to understand the true spirit of New England, to see how the pursuit of individual freedom gave rise to small-town values, great industry, and a culture of rugged individualism. Here, the wilderness has remained a source of inspiration and a companion to many for centuries. Poet Donald Hall tells us that New England's hold on its own past is frail. But that history and culture remain alive in the land and people of New Hampshire. In a state always ready to rally around its revolutionary cry, independence now and independence forever.